In this presentation, we will both enter bills and then pay bills. In other words, we will be using the enter bills transactions for, in essence, the month-end billing process, typical kind of bills that we would see at the end of the month, things like the utility bill, the phone bill. That will be increasing the accounts payable and increasing whatever other account is involved, such as expense accounts. We will then use the pay bill feature in order to pay the bills. That will then be decreasing the accounts payable account and decreasing the checking account as we write checks within QuickBooks Pro 2020, QuickBooks Desktop 2020. Here we are in our Get Great Guitars file. We currently have the open windows open. You can open the open windows by selecting the view dropdown and selecting the open windows list. We're currently going to be in the vendors section. Within the vendors section, we will be entering bills and then paying bills. So in this process, we're going to be thinking about those types of bills that really are the types of bills we typically see at the end of the month. We're going to have the bills that we would collect and we would be paying them periodically, such as the phone bill, the utility bills, those types of bills that will repeat oftentimes and be very similar in nature. Now, note that in the prior month, we had done this and we had written checks for them directly. We just got the bills, we took the bills, we wrote a check for them. You can do that. But there are some reasons why you might want to use the billing process and then the pay bill process instead. One is, as we've discussed in some prior presentations, when you enter the bill, then you can enter the bill whenever you get it. You don't have to basically hold on to the bill and wait till you're ready to pay the bill, which oftentimes you want to do more at the end of the process, the later the better, to pay the bill. But you can enter it at this point in time. That'll be closer to the point in time that the actual expense was incurred, and therefore you'll be recording the expense closer to the time that it was incurred. You also don't have to deal with a bunch of paper bills all around, or you can put them somewhere else rather than having some tracking system on which bill is going to be due. Then if we're going to close this back out, we can then pay the bill and be able to sort the bills and determine which bills need to be paid depending on the due date. So this is a very useful feature. People that work in the payable account for companies may spend, you can have a full-time job basically just doing the payable and sorting out the bills that are going to be paid or need to be paid within an organization. It's also useful too, if you're writing the checks out of the system, to use this screen, because this screen will allow you to take the checks, print the pre-formatted checks, and then put them into the printer and print them all at one time. You can do that with the checks, just entering checks as well, but I find this screen easier to use for that. You can select whatever bills you want to pay, put the checks into the printer, and print them out in this format in a fairly efficient format. So those are the two main benefits, of course, to entering the bills in this format. Obviously, when we pay the bills, we are in essence writing a check, which will be the same kind of form within QuickBooks as the write check form down here. However, QuickBooks will differentiate it within the system as a pay bills form, because when we write these checks, they're always going to be paying down a payable type of account. And so it's useful for QuickBooks to be able to point that up, and we will see that as we go through the system. So we're going to write some bills first. Going to open up the bill, and we're going to write a bill for Verizon. So I'm going to type in Verizon. Note Verizon is already in the system because we wrote a check to Verizon in the prior month. We just simply wrote a check. I'm going to say tab, and there we have the 2/28. That's the date we want. The amount is going to be $365, and then the due date is in accordance with the system that we set up the general terms. We can change the terms if we so choose here. I'm not going to put a memo. A memo is always good if you want to put more detail within the memo. Note that the telephone bill automatically picked up here. It automatically made the telephone expense. Why? Because we entered Verizon as a vendor last month into a check, and QuickBooks is basically populating that amount given the prior month's information. That's nice. That's useful. Let's go ahead and we're going to say save and new, and we'll make another bill. But before we do, let's take a look at the financial statements in general. Going to the reports drop down, company and financial, going down to the profit and loss report, the balance sheet report, changing the dates up top to customize the report, changing the dates from 01/01/20 to 12/31/20, and then OK. and that's going to give us our balance sheet. We'll note within the balance sheet that we should have the accounts payable then increasing. That's down here. Here's our payable account. Double clicking on that, we have the telephone bill right here. Double clicking that, there is our bill. Closing this back out, closing this back out. We also want to see the other side of it, which will be on the profit and loss. Reports drop down up top, company and financial, profit and loss standard report. We're going to change the range to be 010120 to 123120. Here is our profit and loss report. And of course, we have down here the telephone expense now. Double clicking the telephone expense. We have what we just recorded here. Note the difference between these two items. One was a check last month, this time a bill. If we click on the bill, double click on the bill, there is the bill. Closing this back out, closing this back out, going back to the balance sheet, looking at the accounts payable. The other report reflecting accounts payable is who do we owe that money to? The vendor. To see that, we would go to the reports up top. We're going to go to the vendors and payables. We're going to go down to the vendor balance detail. And then we'll see the Verizon down here. We owe Verizon that $365. The total in this report is $1,565. That $1,565 going back to the balance sheet matches, of course, what's in the payable on the balance sheet, $1,565. Now we're going to go back to our bill. So we're going to go back to the bill again. Let's go back to the home page. I don't know if I deleted the bill or closed it. Let's open up the enter bill one more time or another time. We might do this a few more times. We're going to write the next one. We're going to pay our cable company, our internet service. We're going to say our internet service, let's say, is from Spectrum, which I'm not sure exists anymore, but we're going to keep that as Spectrum is going to be our vendor. We're going to say they provide us the internet for our company. We're going to say, okay, tab. We're going to quick add that because it's a new vendor. So we'll say, okay. And so then the date is going to be 2/28. That is correct. The amount is going to be 180. The terms are fine. We could change the terms here if we so choose. And then in the expenses, it didn't populate because we didn't pay Spectrum last time. This is a new vendor. So, and where are we going to put this? This is one of those cases where we could put this in multiple different areas. It kind of depends because if we pay the internet, we might think of it as utilities, maybe in general. We might think of it as, we might pay it with our phone company. So we might think of it as our phone company. We might pay it with our cable, our TV kind of cable company or something like that. We might group it there, although that doesn't seem, the TV itself doesn't seem like a business expense. So we might want to break it out. We might want to say, hey, I want to track my internet separate and see what that tracking will be, which seems relevant too, because it could be a substantial or relevant cost to many businesses. So if I select the drop down and say, what should I put the cable company to? You could think of the telephone bill. You could think utilities. I'm going to choose the one here. I'm going to choose computer and internet expense. So notice QuickBooks has an expense set up basically for computer and internet. And that's how I would think about just about any bill you're going to have or any expense anytime that happens. Think about, okay, let's take a look at what QuickBooks says. What kind of accounts do they have? Does one look appropriate? If it does, I would default to using that unless I have a good reason to add a new account. And that'll restrict you from just basically like some people do, and I totally understand it. Some people make a new account just about for every vendor. And that means what happens is you're just going to end up with a lot of expense accounts, which is basically too much detail to really get any information from the financial statement. So you want to think about, how many expenses you need to set up. Once they're set up, then it's all easy because most of them will repeat themselves month after month and you don't have to do anything new. It'll go to the proper account. But whenever you set up a new account, you want to be very careful to make sure that you're, not adding too many accounts because once it's set up, it'll be nice and easy from that point. All right, so let's go ahead and save and new on this one. See what happens there. Let's go back to our rounds here. We're going to go back to the balance sheet. Within the balance sheet, we got the accounts payable. Double clicking the accounts payable, we see that we have the 180 to Spectrum here. Double clicking that, there's our bill. Closing this back out and closing this back out, we see that the profit and loss, going to the profit and loss now, we now have another account or type of account, computer and internet expenses. Notice within the expense categories, it's in order by the type of account or the account name, alphabetical order. So it's an order of income and then expenses, and then within the category by the name. If you want to adjust the order in any other way, you would need to use account numbers, which we may look into in the future. So if we double clicked on that, of course, we would then get to our bill, double clicking the bill, there's the bill. Closing this back out, back to the balance sheet in the open windows. We note that then if we look at the supporting documents for accounts payable, that's in the vendor balance detail report. Vendor balance detail report, then we see Spectrum here, here's Spectrum, there's the 180 owed to Spectrum. The total in the detail report, 1,745, matching what is on the balance sheet report, 1,745. Let's do it again, back to the home tab. And the reason the bill's not open is because I keep on opening another bill and then closing it. So we got to go back here and open the bill. So I'm going to enter the bills. And now we're going to make the payment to Edison, which is our electric company. So the electric company sent us a bill. Their name is Edison. So we're typing in Edison. That's going to be, it's already set up because we wrote a check to Edison in the past. It's at 228. That's what we want. The amount's going to be for 648. That's the amount. The bill date is going to be good according to the terms. We could change the terms here. And note, it already picked up the utilities. Why? Because we wrote a check to Edison last time and it went to the utilities, therefore it picks it up. Notice how easy it is on the second month or the second time we pay someone. It should already be set up. As long as we set it up properly first time, then we're good to go and it should just repeat the process as we move forward. Once we enter this, once again, accounts payable will go up. The other side, utilities will also go up. Let's check it out. This time I'm going to say save and close, since I'm going to close it anyways as I go through the process. Save and close. We're going to go then to the balance sheet. We see within the balance sheet the accounts payable. Double clicking the accounts payable. We see Edison there. Double clicking Edison. We see the bill that we just wrote. Closing this out. Closing this out. We also note that the Edison, the accounts payable supporting document will be the vendor balance detail. Vendor balance detail now showing the telephone or the Edison bill up top. There's the total Edison bill of 648. The total being the 2,393. That 2,393, of course, matching what's on the balance sheet here in the open windows. The 2,393. The other side going to the profit and loss report. Profit and loss report here, basically the income statement. We increased the utilities. Here's the utilities. Double clicking that. There is our increase. Notice we have two things. The first month was a check. The second month, this month, we entered a bill. Double clicking on the bill, there's our bill. Closing this back out, closing this back out, back to the home tab. Now that we've entered our bills, we're going to go ahead and pay the bills. So we're going to go over now and pay the bills using the pay bill feature. We're going to select that item, and then we're going to leave Epiphone open. So notice if we go through this once again, we see that we have to show the bills. We can go to the due on or before, which can help us to sort the bills. We've got the filter to sort by, and these are other sorting options that we can be using. What we're going to do here is we're going to check off the three bills that we want to pay. We want to pay Verizon, Spectrum, and Edison. We want to pay those three bills. We're going to keep Epiphone here. We're not going to pay the Epiphone yet, so we're keeping that up top. If we scroll down here, we see that the date is going to be 2/28. That's what we want. We're going to write a check. Now note that we could basically print the check if we had the checks to print, and this would be a great system to use because we can easily enter the bills now, check off the ones that we want to print, and then just basically take the printed checks or the checks that have been pre-formatted, because we still have to buy the checks, put them into the printer, and then it'll print the data on it. It won't have the check numbers need to be on the pre-printed checks, however, in order to have that internal control. But what we're going to do is we're just going to say assign the check number, and then that would be similar to us basically having the checkbook in our hand. We're writing the check, but we want to enter the data into the QuickBooks system. So we're going to say pay selected bills, and then I like to say let QuickBooks assign the check number, because that means QuickBooks will automatically assign the next check number in the row, and that is going to be a good internal control check for us. So I'm going to say go ahead and assign it. Okay, it does so, and then it says don't run out of checks and whatnot, and then here's the checks that were written. So we got these three checks. Here are the check numbers. I like to close this and actually go to the bank register. So I'm going to go to the banking drop down, use register, and say okay. Scroll down to the bottom of this. Here are our 3 checks. The 180, the 365, and the 125. These are the 3 check numbers. If we were to be writing these out of, or these are the 3 check numbers. If we were to be writing these out, and notice it's the 648, the 180, and the 365. If we were to be writing these out of our checkbook, then we would want to match up and tie out these numbers that were automatically generated in the system to our checkbook to make sure that there's not any skipped checks. So then I'm going to close this back out. Let's take a look at what would happen to the financial statements going back to the balance sheet. Going back to the balance sheet, we then see the accounts payable should have gone back down. If we double click on the accounts payable, we see now that we have these 3 checks. They tie out, of course. It went up by 648, it went down by 648. Went up by 180, went down by 180. This is the pattern we would expect to see in accounts payable. Closing this back out. Or by the way, if we go back in there and I double click on any of them, of course the form used is a check. So it's still just a check, the form that will be used. If I close this back out and I look at the reference, notice it says bill payment check, which is basically still just a check, but it's a special check or a format that's telling us, hey, this is a check that was specifically done reducing accounts payable. So I'm going to close this back out. We see now there's 1,200 in the accounts payable. That should be supported by the vendor balance detail telling us who we owe that money to. Let's take a look at the vendor balance detail. We see that the Edison had the bill, then we had the payment, now it's down to 0. We have Epiphone still outstanding. There's the bill that we did not pay, the 1,200. Then we have Spectrum, the bill, and then the payment back down to 0. Verizon bill, payment back down to 0. Total in this balance is 1,200. That, of course, matches what's on the balance sheet back to the balance sheet in the open windows of the 1,200. There's no effect from this transaction on the profit and loss statement. We know that the accounts payable is going down, and of course the other side is in the checking account. Double clicking the checking account, scrolling back down, we see these 3 checks: Spectrum, Verizon, and Edison. So let's just go back, and I'm closing this back out. We're going to review our account balances now. This is where we stand at this point in time. Check your numbers. If everything looks good, then you're good. If not, then go back and see if you can figure out what is wrong. If you would like to simply push forward without figuring out what's wrong, or you want to jump to the next point in the problem, we will provide backup files that you can then just restore and go straight to the current point in the problem that you would like to move forward with.